really kind of starting off with a joke like, a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar. But really what I want to find out is what's the difference between a lobbyist and a lawyer?
Well, there's a lot. Lobbyists are professionals that are hired by clients to represent their interests before usually a government body. Sometimes they're state lobbyists, sometimes they're federal lobbyists. I'm a federal lobbyist who represents my clients before Congress and before the administration, regardless of what administration that is. Me and my colleagues help corporations, nonprofits, trade associations. Some lobbyists represent foreign governments. We don't do any of that work, but basically anybody who has a problem to solve or wants to create an opportunity with the federal government, they will hire a lobbyist to help them navigate the process of legislation. The old cartoon, How a Bill Becomes a Law, is not really applicable to the way it's actually accomplished here in Washington. It's much more complicated and much more intricate than a bill moving through a committee, then going to the floor and then on to the president. There's a lot of steps that need to be taken, and me and my colleagues are the individuals you hire to help navigate that process, help develop, manage, and implement a campaign to accomplish a goal on behalf of a client. And like I said, there's large corporate entities, Fortune 50 companies that have teams of lobbyists, and there's small trade associations that also have lobbyists that work with them to help educate members of Congress, educate members of the administration to advance a goal, or sometimes even stop a problem from happening.
Has the business of lobbying, has it changed over the years, or is it since the invention, or how has it shifted?
Yeah, it's changed a lot, and for the better. I will say I started my career on Capitol Hill in 1994. I worked for a senator from Tennessee named Fred Thompson. Left the Hill around the year 2000. And at that time, lobbying was still in a position where very successful lobbyists could pick up the phone, call a member of Congress or a senator, insert language into a piece of legislation that's moving, and secure a win for a client pretty quickly. Thankfully, in the last 2 decades or so, there's been a lot of sunlight shined upon the process of legislation. So we have to register every quarter who we represent, how much we're getting paid, and what issues we're working on for those entities. No matter who the entity is, we've got to register every quarter. And what that has done is made the process much more, sophisticated. There's a lot more that goes into being successful for your clients now versus the opportunity to just pick up the phone and have a friend of yours who's a member of Congress do a favor for you. Those don't happen anymore, which is good. So the sunshine that's been applied to the process is a very positive one, one that makes our job harder, but it's really good for the American taxpayer and the process in total. So it's changed a lot, but it's changed for the better, and it's made us have to adapt to that and how we represent our clients and be successful for our clients.
I like how you applied, saying sunlight, not just shedding some light on it, but some sunlight to try to clean up that process. And like you said, it's more difficult on you, but the sunlight that it sheds. So I like the way that you put that.
Yeah.
So for everyone who is watching today on video or listening to us on Spotify, this is Chris Lamond, and we want to welcome him to the Breaking the Ice podcast. He is not an Iceman, as is probably clear to you, but to make it clear to you, he is a friend to the Iceman and the ice industry. He is one of the founders of the Thorn Run Partners group, and their firm represents the IPIA and other ICE interests that we'll talk about today. And did I say anything wrong in that, Chris? I didn't muck it up. Is that
You got it.
legit?
You got it. I've been proud to work with the International Packaged Ice Association for about 12, 14 years. I've seen a lot of changes in the industry, a lot of very positive ones, and have been proud to work with the leadership at the IPIA for that time. And I think we're doing really good things and advancing the ball down the field in terms of making Congress and states understand why it's important to care about food safety as it relates to packaged ice.
Yeah,
So I do want to know how did you first make the connection with the IPIA? Was there some initial interaction that got you involved with them?
A friend of a friend introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Ben Key, who was an executive with the Ready Ice Corporation out of Dallas, Texas. And Ben was also the chairman of the International Packaged Ice Association that time. And they were looking to come to Washington for a congressional fly-in, it's called, where your trade association membership comes to Washington to storm the Hill, to meet with members of Congress and senators and staff and administration officials to talk about issues that you care about. And I was originally retained to help manage that fly-in. And we organized a set of about 75 meetings on the Hill. We organized talking points for members to use, and we started the process of building a federal affairs strategy to help the ice industry, and particularly the IPIA and the work they were doing around PICs and just generally advancing the interest of food safety as it relates to packaged ice.
Yeah, I was hoping it'd be a more interesting story, like you slipped on a bag of ice or something. So, no, thank you for letting us give a little bit of allowing us some insight into that. We have a tradition here. I want to kind of go to what we call an icebreaker. So, these are just questions that we have that we like to bring up. They're still typically on topic, but sometimes bring in some levity, and so hopefully they don't fall flat. But one of the questions I had, you actually brought up Fred Thompson and his name and the work. I believe he had a bit of a hiatus there for a while, and I was just kind of curious what you thought of his performance in Days of Thunder.
Well, if someone asks me what my favorite Fred Thompson movie is, I go to that one, because that is my favorite movie. He was involved. He was a very successful lawyer. He got his start in politics working for Howard Baker in the Watergate Commission. He was actually the staffer who led the questioning of the Nixon administration officials for Howard Baker, and received some acclaim for that. He went back to Tennessee to practice law and stumbled upon acting as they made a movie about one of the cases he was working on. And he ended up reading for himself and ended up working in about 15 or so major motion pictures as a pretty famous character actor. And that was alongside his legal career in Tennessee. And then, kind of just did a movie a year for a number of years before running for Senate, and then was in the Senate for a number of years, and then retired before running for president in 2008.
So Days of Thunder, I am, obviously being a NASCAR movie, I'm from Talladega County here in Alabama. Okay. So obviously we know about the super speedway here. It's world famous, but I am not a NASCAR fan by any stretch of the means, but I did enjoy that movie immensely. So if it's ever on, I stop and watch it, and just thoroughly enjoyed his performances. So did he take a hiatus? Because I was trying to look at his career versus when he was doing the majority of his acting. Was that a requirement, or how does that work? I'm not sure.
So a majority of the, all of the acting was done before he was a sitting senator. You can act in movies as a member or a senator. Very, very few do. There's been cameos by members. Senator Leahy from Vermont famously was in all the Batman movies for some reason, which is an odd trivia question for Senator Leahy fans. But he didn't do any of that while he was in Washington. He did majority of it before his career, but then actually was also on Law and Order for a few years after leaving the Senate, which was introduced him to a number of new fans, and was very good in that series, and is very, very accomplished actor, in addition to being a brilliant legislator.
Yeah, that's what I remembered him from. I felt like he was in it, and when we started taking a look at his list, that's what popped in my mind.
Yeah, most people do.
Yeah.
Days of Thunder is still number one to me, so it doesn't matter.
So bringing it back to the ICE world, wanted to ask you, what is your long-term overarching goal or project that you're working on for the IPIA?
Okay, so ultimately, we would like. I describe it as there's three legs to the stool of influence that we are trying to help the IPIA with. The first is the regulators, so the FDA at the federal level, and state legislatures and state regulators at the state level. That's the first leg of the stool, and they have a real important role in the process for food safety. And we want them to, frankly, just care more about the quality of ice sold to consumers throughout the United States. That's goal one, is to get the FDA to provide more regulatory oversight, to inspect more ice manufacturers, to ultimately provide a safer food product for consumers throughout the United States. The second leg of that stool is the inspection community, so food safety inspectors that go into retail outlets to look at their commercial ice machines. I do a lot of speaking before the food safety inspection community, talk about how to properly clean and sanitize an ice machine, how to inspect an ice machine properly, what to look out for. And then the third leg is consumers. We manage a website called safeice.org that is really our consumer-facing tool to educate consumers about why they should care about ice safety, what they should look for when they buy their ice, and what they should pay attention to for their family safety. But that's ultimately the goal, is to raise the level of awareness among those three legs of that stool. So whether it's a social media campaign that we work on for consumers to feel like they're more aware about looking for the IPIA label when they buy ice, and the FDA and state regulators to make sure they understand that contamination outbreaks are happening, that they know about the studies that we work on, and communicate through with our education partners that we've worked with to have those studies, and make sure they're aware that they need to treat ice as a high-risk food, the same way NSF categorizes packaged ice. And it's been a challenge to get the FDA and their limited resources to kind of raise that level of awareness for ice. But we're working hard. We're making progress in a number of states who are passing legislation to satisfy concerns that we've raised with them. We're seeing more and more retailers require that when they buy bags of ice, it's got to be from an IPIA member. So big box retailer stores are buying IPIA exclusively. Army Corps of Engineers requires that all procurement of their ice come from an IPIA member. FEMA requires it as well during emergencies. So we've made a lot of progress over the last number of years in advancing the idea that ice is food, and making sure that they frankly give us the attention that we deserve as a food product. That was the early stages of we talked about the storming the hill and the early days of working for the ice industry. We were just trying to really just focus in on the phrase ice is food to make sure everybody realized that, yes, ice is a food product that deserves to be regulated and deserves to be taken seriously.
The episodes that we've had, I think this has been brought up at least on 2 other episodes, just talking about ice as food and the IPIA, and how big this is for food safety and the consumption of ice, because a lot of people just don't think about it. They don't think about that ice that they're consuming, or the ice that is around the drink lid as they open up that can, even if they're not drinking ice, but it's just chilling their beverages. I mean, it's still melting. It's still there. It's still something you're consuming, whether you know it or not. So it's it is a big thing. So we know that you recently joined Jared and Maria from the IPIA on a call with the FDA, and we're just kind of curious if you had anything to share from that.
It was one of the better calls that we've had with the FDA. We've done a lot over the years. Like I said earlier, I referenced a couple of studies that the IPIA has worked with 2 universities to conduct and basically compare ice manufactured with the PICS standards, the IPIA's PICS standards, Packaged Ice Quality Control Standards, which I'm sure you've discussed on this podcast before. Compared that ice to ice that was manufactured without any standards. And those studies proved out a point that we've been making for decades, which is ice that's manufactured with these standards is safe, without contamination, without basically any adulterated food products included in it. And ice that is manufactured without our standards comes back on average 1 in 4 samples come back with some sort of contamination. And that number gets attention. And I'll speak to some other studies that have happened later, I guess. But those numbers are pretty stark. I mean, we get salmonella hits, we get E. coli hits, unfortunately. And our message to the FDA and our message to the states is that we don't want to be caught up in a foodborne outbreak that hits industries all the time, because a large majority of our members are small family-owned businesses that sell a large majority of their product in the summer months. And if a foodborne outbreak, a foodborne illness outbreak occurs, say Memorial Day weekend, and people stop buying ice for a 6-week period, the same way they do when every time there's an outbreak in salmonella for your romaine lettuce, or peanut butter is a very important one, because like peanut butter, there really isn't a lot of brand recognition for packaged ice. So there's a couple big names in the industry, but as a whole, I bet if you survey the average consumer, they can't really name a brand of bag ice. So when the peanut butter outbreak occurred in Atlanta, it wasn't Jif or it wasn't Peter Pan, but people stopped buying Jif and Peter Pan peanut butter because they just were afraid of the foodborne outbreak that occurred in a peanut butter factory in Georgia that wasn't even making jars of ice. So if people stop buying ice the same way they stopped buying peanut butter, then a lot of people lose their jobs. So this is a self-preservation effort, because we know ice can become contaminated through all of these studies, and our members spend a lot of time, a lot of resources, and a lot of effort ensuring that their food product is safe. It makes sense for the FDA to do the same, and that's the conversation we have with the FDA every time we talk to them. This last conversation was positive. They want to have more discussions with us. They're excited to learn about our studies and our issues. And, frankly, they're excited that an industry has taken the time and effort to establish our own standards, because without the IPIA standards, there would be no baseline for packaged ice manufacturers to follow. And the barrier of entry to become an ice basically wholesale manufacturer is really low. You need a power source, a freezer, and a water source, and that's it. And if you just wanted to put one in your garage and you wanted to know how to do it correctly, the only place to go is the IPIA. You can't look at in the Federal Food Code. You can't look at good manufacturing practices at the FDA. There's a handful of states that give you a roadmap on how to do it, and then there's the IPI, and that's it. And it's unfortunate, but we're working hard to make sure more and more government regulators, not only in the United States, are also working with Canada as well.
Yeah.
that they understand about it and they prioritize ice as an issue to take care of.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about the Canadian ice industry, but I just want to kind of wrap up the topic about the FDA. And I think you probably, and most people have a pretty good understanding here in Alabama. We're a fairly conservative state. So when we tend not to ask for more federal or state regulations here, but I think you've explained it pretty clear on why that you're looking for those standards to be implemented, just because there hasn't been any in the health importance. So I appreciate you giving that pretty deep insight into why you're seeking from an IPIA level.
Yeah, that's not to interrupt you. Sorry, that's a challenge that we run into is, when we go into a state that tries to eliminate regulations for business, we run into a little bit of hurdles there to overcome. But just describing the current landscape of how consumers are buying and consuming ice helps us get over those hurdles. But it is hard. It is a unique instance where an industry is asking for more regulation over themselves. But it's because we want to preserve the industry. We want to make sure that the families that run these businesses are producing a safe food product and protecting all the consumer safety.
Because that's going to be the good thing for their businesses in the long run and good for the consumer, right? So just another icebreaker to break it up here. We looked up and we see that you came from Furman in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And you work out of Washington. But where did you grow up? Just wondering.
Yeah, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, just outside a little town called Bethesda, Maryland, where I still live today. But did go to South Carolina, which I enjoyed tremendously, and thought about staying down there after college, but did come home. And Washington, D.C. is a great place to raise a family. I've got two beautiful children and a wife that we really enjoy living here. And even though it's the hustle and bustle of the city, there's a lot to do. The ocean's only a couple hours away. The mountains are close by, and it's just a lot of culture in the city that we take advantage of.
Chris, I want to shift back to the ice industry, and what are you doing, and how are things going with the Canadian ice industry?
Right. So very similar to what we're doing at the FDA in the United States. We're working with Canada and their food safety regulator, which is called Canadians Food Inspection Agency, CFIA. So their inspection agency regulates food safety as it relates to all the foods manufactured and sold in Canada. So we do the same thing with them that we do with the FDA. They're a little different in Canada. They are more heavily governed by their provinces than they are by the federal government in Ottawa. So their provinces have a lot more ability to impact change to regulations in Canada. The ice industry is a little smaller up there than it is in the United States, but still has a number of very successful companies that follow the PICS program as we do here in the United States, care about the industry as we do here in the United States, and want to see CFIA the same way. They want to see CFIA in a number of their provinces react to our concerns the same way that a number of our states have here in the United States, and hopefully the FDA will. So a very robust program that's been implemented up there. We're actually on the verge of working with one of their leading universities to conduct a study of packaged ice manufactured in a couple of provinces to kind of add on to the list of resources that we've compiled in the United States and have one done in Canada that helps make the case to the CFIA that the problem is universal. It's not just the United States. It also is a problem that is occurring in Canada as well.
So that's a strategy to diversify your studies coming from different locations so that you can make a case over there as well. That's really smart. So what are some of the other studies that have been conducted, and how have you seen the impact from them? Have they paid off? Has it been worth doing those studies?
Yeah, they've been really helpful. Like I said earlier, the main focus of each study has been to compare ice that is manufactured by an IPIA member to ice that is manufactured without the standards that the IPIA requires for membership. And all the studies we've done have shown the same thing, and that ice manufactured with the PICS program comes back 100% clean, and ice that's manufactured without our standards comes back on average of 25% above the basic levels of contamination that are set forth in PICS. So in addition to just basic sanitary standards not being complied with, we unfortunately find salmonella, we find E. coli, we find fecal contamination, and it's a benefit for us to be able to have those studies as a resource to make the case for us, right? So it's independent, peer-reviewed studies that are published by food safety journals that help us independently make the case that we need to raise a level of awareness of all three of those legs of that stool I mentioned. The regulators, the food safety inspectors, and the consumers need to care about these issues. There's one other study that we weren't a part of that is an interesting kind of anecdote about the industry, and it was done in Europe in 2019, and it looked at three popular coffee outlets in Europe, one being Starbucks, and it took ice samples from a large number of stores, way more sample size than we did in the United States for our studies. But it found that in Starbucks, the ice that was sampled, over 15% of that ice had unsatisfactory levels of fecal contamination on that ice.
Oh, wow.
And I gave a speech at the National Environmental Health Association annual conference a year after that and cited this study. And afterwards, a gentleman came up to me and said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And I said, "Of course." And he gave me his business card, and he was the top food safety official for Starbucks Corporation.
Oh,
and
wow.
we talked about that study and what they were doing in response. And interestingly enough, they were looking at the time for a way to acquire new ice machines in every store around the world because they wanted a machine that was easier to clean and easier to sanitize because the machines they had just made it burdensome to clean on a frequent basis. And the result was they were getting, obviously from this study, poorly manufactured ice and selling that ice to consumers. And they were so concerned about it, they replaced every ice machine around the world with new machines to ensure that their food product is safe. And back to what I said earlier, more retailers are understanding. The corporations and the big stores that have food safety as a priority, they get it. They understand that anytime there's water involved, anytime there's handling of a food product involved, there can become contamination pretty quickly. So they take it really seriously the same way Starbucks did. So that study, and we talk about studies, really changed how Starbucks conducts their packaged, not their packaged ice, but their ice that's provided in their drinks. So a big win, I think, for consumers because of that study that took place in Europe. So we're hoping more studies can happen like that to raise the level of awareness. We do a lot on that safeice.org website to promote those studies and ensure that folks are aware of it.
Well, when you started that story, I got a little nervous. I thought, I don't know if we're going to be able to publish this video, but turns out it's a great recommendation for Starbucks for taking corrective action and doing.
They did the right thing, and it's not the easiest thing to do to manufacture ice properly. It takes time. It takes some resources. But if you don't do it, we know people are getting sick, and that's the downside. So not only do companies care about their consumers, but there's a liability issue as well to worry about.
Well, to go along with what Jeff was saying, I was actually thinking maybe on the other side of that, we had something groundbreaking that you were announcing right now about Starbucks on here, and we might go viral and get BTI on the map a little bit quicker. So, no, but that is great. And when you mention E. coli, salmonella, I know those are extremely dangerous illnesses. But when you throw in fecal, that really gets me like, I know it doesn't necessarily have to take it to the next level, but in my mind, it takes it to the next level when you start to
Yeah.
get some of those contaminants in there.
There's only one way that happens, and it's poor handling by the employees. So that speaks to training. That speaks to raising that level of awareness at the training side of things. So when you've got, let me step back and talk about where ice is sold, right? So you've got bags of ice that are sold at that are manufactured by the IPIA members and sold to grocery stores or convenience stores, resold to consumers. And then you've got gas stations and marinas that are bagging their own ice. And there's not a very robust food safety program at gas stations and marinas. They don't just make a lot of food, so there's no need to really train their employees, they think, on food safety. So what happens is they store the ice machine near the toilets. They don't train their employees how to properly scoop a bag of ice, how to handle the scoop, how to clean and sanitize the machine. As a result, bad things happen.
I'm sure everybody that's listening to this podcast or watching have in hotels. I've heard horror stories. I've seen a few things myself of those vending machines just sitting there. Now, I don't see near as many of the open ones where you can just open and scoop out ice as much as you used to. And I would assume that has something to do with cleanliness, but maybe not. But I personally witnessed, now I was in my younger years, I didn't do it, but personally witnessed some things that would make you cringe. And then I hear stories of just the sanitation, people, not considering the next person that's going to be walking up. So it's definitely a serious subject going on.
You mentioned vending ice. Those hotel and motels, basically vending machines. You got to wonder how often they're cleaning those, how often they're sanitizing those. And vending machines as a whole in the ice industry are getting much more prevalent. So I don't know and you may see these in the Southeast where you are a lot more than maybe the Northeast or certainly in colder climates. But these vending machines that vend bags of ice to consumers are getting smaller and smaller. They're getting more prevalent. And we've included those in our studies in the past. They have the same contamination hits levels as the retail outlets that bag their own ice. They're not cleaned and sanitized on a frequent basis. And when I talk to the inspection community, when I do these speeches around the country, states handle vending machines very differently. So some states even prohibit vending machines from being registered with the Department of Health because they deem it to be prepackaged food. So when you have a Coke machine that's loaded with prepackaged soda pop, probably not a need to inspect that. But when you have a vending machines that is essentially a manufacturing unit, say it's making ice, say it's making ice cream. Sometimes we're seeing more and more with the invention of robotics. We're seeing more and more food products going into vending machines. You see them a lot on college campuses where you can basically choose the pizza toppings on your vending pizza. You can choose soft serve ice cream toppings on your ice cream vending machine. There's a burrito machine out there. There's all kinds of foods getting into the vending machine business. But when states don't require vending machines to register with the Department of Health, there's no way for the inspection community to be able to inspect these locations because they don't know where they are. Right. So it's a big loophole in the ecosystem of food safety, because if the vending machines that are essentially wholesale manufacturing units, like I said earlier, all you need is electrical outlet, a source of water, and a freezer to be able to be an ice machine. And these vending units have that. They put them anywhere they want because they're not registered, they're not inspected, and frankly, even sold by the manufacturers as a way to kind of just collect pocket money, right? What do they call it? Mailbox money. We just get your check every month from the credit company that's processed those transactions, and they don't require you to clean and sanitize the machine as you should be doing. Let alone the chutes are exposed to the outside. Insects get in them. We've heard stories of birds getting in them. I imagine we haven't been able to prove this, but I imagine there's some dogs that go up and lick the ice chute.
I think licking may be the least of our worries of the leg getting hiked. So
I wanted to keep it family friendly, but I think those are concerns that we raise, and we see these vending machines pop up, and it's just it's a problem, and one where consumers need to understand the risks that are associated with those types of vending machines. And you mentioned hotels and motels. We don't have the resources to really go after them, or restaurants, but we try to raise the bar as it relates to the understanding of these issues. And that we speak predominantly about packaged ice, but we're really talking about food safety for all ice.
Got you. I think we have a couple more questions and another icebreaker, but we want to know a little bit more about you, Chris. Instead of outside the ice industry, what are some of your hobbies, your passions? What do you do during your downtime?
I played golf in college, and it's still a pretty strong hobby of mine to get out on the weekends with my children and play some golf. So I do that when I have some free time. Love to exercise and work out, and try to do that as well as much as I can. So a pretty active individual, and I've got children who are 17 and 14, and a wife that's pretty active too. So we're always out and about, and trying to stay as active as we can and as much good health as we can, and trying to teach my children those types of examples of a healthy lifestyle. And
yeah, very good.
Yeah.
So we have a follow-up golf question. I'll let Ethan ask it because it's important to him.
Well, it is. I mean, have you ever had the opportunity to, or ever played Augusta? And if you haven't, what would you give to be able to go and play Augusta?
So I've been to Augusta many times. I've never played it. I've got two friends of mine that are members, so I hope to get there at some point. But it's not. It's not something I've been able to play yet. It's one of the. I talk about sports experiences that exceed expectations, and there's only a handful of them. Augusta National is one of them. The Grove at Ole Miss during a football game is another. But Augusta, the Masters, it's just probably one of the prettiest places on earth.
Absolutely. I've always found it interesting the way that they pump in cold water or whatever, they got the piping through the azalea, so they can time it perfectly to make sure it looks perfect, on TV. And so I do need to ask you, since you played in college, what's your handicap then and now? So we'll do that.
I was a plus handicap in college. I'm probably a little bit worse than scratch right now.
Wow!
But it takes a lot of effort. I don't play a lot, but I hit a lot of golf balls in practice on the weekends. So it's my friends who played in college. We always see one or two drop off every 2 years or so because they're tired of putting the work in to try to stay good, because it gets annoying if you go out there, you've been so competitive for a number of years, and all of a sudden you can't do what you used to be able to. So either get frustrated and you kind of slow down, or you double down and work harder. Now, not to embarrass myself, but I'm headed into the years where I can start to play senior tournaments, and it's kind of an exciting opportunity to kind of keep my game sharp, to try to compete with some of my peers. But it's
go ahead. Yeah, I played collegiate tennis, and I know exactly what you're saying. I just turned 47, and just my body. I've had 7 surgeries. I continue to injure myself. I say I don't injure myself taking out the garbage, but I do injure myself, and usually to the breaking point. So it's a struggle, and it can be difficult from time to time. So one other kind of with that icebreaker, whether it's a politician, the most interesting person, it could even be somebody from the IPIA or the ice industry. Who's been the most interesting person you've ever played golf with?
The most interesting person I've ever played golf with. A couple of years ago, I had the chance to play with Rafael Nadal,
Wow.
who was in town.
Nice tie into the tennis. Very nice. Well done there. So
had a chance to play with him. Incredible athlete, great player. I caddied for Don Johnson one time as a kid. He was in Washington, D.C., shooting a movie, and had a chance to caddy for him. That was pretty cool. But never got a chance to play with him. But I guess that's a two-person answer for you. One playing, one caddying, one working.
Hey, it was a tennis tie-in. I'll take it. That's awesome.
Well, we were wondering if you had any stories to tell on any icemen out there that really enjoy golf, since we know that a lot of the conventions, some of the guys will look to play golf. You don't have any embarrassing stories or funny stories about playing with different guys in the ice industry?
Nothing embarrassing. It's a fun-loving crew for sure. There is a tournament that they have at the annual convention. Sometimes I get the chance to play in it. Sometimes the timing doesn't work out. But I just say this: the beer cart is a very active.
That's right. Does anybody check the ice to see what type of ice they're using?
Usually they don't really care. Although I will tell you, this is a little bit morbid, but there was unfortunately a young man, a 15-year-old boy in Phoenix, Arizona, who died from contaminated ice in a golf course in Phoenix, Arizona. So we talk about. Not to turn dark on us, but we talk about studies, we talk about contamination, and we also talk a lot about some of these unfortunate incidents that have occurred. So within the last, I'll say 6 years, there have been 2 examples of individuals dying as a result of eating bad ice. One was on that golf course, and the other one was in a University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, where a patient was getting ready for surgery, and the only thing they were eating was ice chips in the hospital floor ice machine. And sometimes when you're, ill, you cough, and when they were consuming ice, they exasperated and ingested some of that ice in their lungs, and it had listeria on it. Ended up killing that patient. And it was traced back to the ice. So I know we were getting off an icebreaker and talking about lighter subjects, but it did remind me that these issues have real consequences. So in addition to protecting the industry, in addition to protecting the members of the IPIA, we are trying to protect the consumers from fatalities that we know have happened. So again, apologize for getting a little bit morbid on you, but you did remind me that that's an important aspect of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, no, it's real. I mean, facts are facts, and you've been able to detail out the facts, and facts have consequences, right? So, and you've been able to detail out those. I'd like to wrap on the last question and get your opinion or your thoughts. Have you ever thought about starting, buying, investing in your own ice company?
I haven't. Well, I guess I have, but I've been able to tour a lot of ice plants. I've been able to talk to a number of successful business owners that are in the ice industry. I see how hard they work. I see how many resources they put into their businesses. It is for a large period of the year, a 24/7 operation. These individuals put their heart and soul into their businesses, and I've got my own lobbying business. I don't have time to do that. The effort, the passion that IPIA members have for their industry is admirable, and one that it's not an easy endeavor just to become a successful ice business. It's a competitive business. Commodity products are a tough business to get into. And I admire all these hardworking businesses that, a lot of them have been passed down generation to generation, and, employing a lot of people throughout the year to give back to the economy and the local community. So I have thought about it only in that I see how hard they work, how much passion they have for their jobs and their employees, and just admire it from afar versus trying to be one of them.
Absolutely. And Chris, we want to go ahead and just say thank you so much for joining, but we also want to give you a plug on your business, Thorn Run Partners, and the work that you guys are doing for the IPIA. More of a levity, we were able to see that I believe you were top 7. Is that right? That we came across?
I think they were ranked number 7 in the 2 most recent rankings that we could find access to. We thought that was pretty neat that you were that high on the list, but we also kind of wondered,
That's right.
Out of hundreds of firms, how do you end up number 7 consistently? Is there a glass ceiling there stopping you from going higher, or
We're hoping BTI, this exposure would get you over that hump.
We get about 99% of our business from referrals from friends and colleagues. So we often have relationships where we pass on money back to those contacts who introduce us to business. So yeah, we can certainly establish a contractual relationship with BTI, and maybe we'll even sponsor a segment on your show. On behalf, maybe have a question of the week from Thorn Run Partners, but
yeah, maybe so. I like your thinking, but
it's a competitive industry, though. I will tell you one more thing, if you don't mind. They say that there's an association for everything in Washington, and a lot of my peers that I've worked with for a number of years always cite the work I do for the IPIA as an example of that fact, that every association is represented in Washington. And who would think that the packaged ice manufacturers would need a lobbyist? And I like to think we've done good work for the IPIA. I think we've got a lot more work to do, but it's always a funny point when my colleagues around town outside of my firm talk about the number of associations that are out there, and IPIA is always cited as one of those among my friends as an example of ones that you wouldn't think are represented, but have a pretty good track record of success in Washington.
Well, we appreciate what you've done, and we just appreciate you being on the podcast today, Chris. We do this from our Routeman Studios here at KCS, located in Pelham, Alabama. We so appreciate you joining us for this podcast. And we hope, all the listeners get something out of here. Do you have any parting words, Jeff?
Yeah, we just really appreciate everything you do year round for the folks in the ice industry, and the leadership that you're providing, the advising that you're doing. And we appreciate your firm and you personally. And thanks for sharing your time with us today. Appreciate it.
And we'll see you at the IPA in Austin this year.
Yeah, I look forward to being there, and it's a great group to work with. Maria Maggio is doing a hell of a job for the industry, and Jared as chairman. Really, the leadership is top notch, and just everybody's doing a great job for the industry. I'm proud to be a part of it. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.